Christmas Eve. The living room glowed with soft light from 100 tiny bulbs strung across the windows. The same floral armchair had sat in the corner for 20 years, and tonight it felt more like a witness stand than a piece of furniture. I perched there, hands folded, waiting for the moment that would once again remind me exactly where I stood in this family. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. The fireplace crackled, but the warmth never touched me. It clung only to my sister Juliet, 26 years old and squealing like a teenager as she tore through gold wrapping paper. "Mom, Dad." "It's exactly what I wanted," she gasped, holding up a cream-colored Gucci Marmont bag. The tag, $300, hung from the strap like a crown jewel. Dad's chest swelled with pride. "Only the best for our baby girl. You deserve it, princess." Mom's face shone like she'd just watched her child win an Olympic medal. I sat still, pulse steady, rehearsed for this moment. My turn. On my lap, a flat envelope with a snowflake sticker. My fingers peeled it open carefully. Inside, a mass-produced card with a snowy mountain scene and 2 printed words, "Season's Greetings." No handwritten note, no $20 bill tucked inside. Not even a "Love Mom and Dad," just $2 worth of cardboard. I didn't let my smile slip. After 29 years, I'd learned to keep my expression calm, like a mask that hides the tremor underneath. But inside, something shattered quietly, permanently. Across the room, Aunt Margaret caught my eye. Her lips parted a flicker of horror before she quickly schooled her face. She knew. She saw. Juliet twirled around the room with her bag, holding it to the light. "It goes with everything I own," she bragged, already snapping photos for Instagram. Mom fussed over her eggnog. Dad checked his watch and muttered about traffic. No one looked at me. Not once. I folded the card carefully and slipped it into my pocket, like a relic, a souvenir of invisibility. Hours earlier, in my small Portland apartment, I'd sat on the floor surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbon. My teacher's salary of $57,000 a year stretched thin between rent and student loans, but I'd saved for months to buy thoughtful gifts. A silk scarf in shades of blue for Mom because she always said blue made her feel young again. A Parker pen engraved with Dad's initials because he'd mentioned losing his old one. A rare art book for Juliet tied with a note about the exhibit we'd promised to see together. I had whispered to my reflection in the mirror, mascara wand trembling in my hand. Maybe this Christmas will finally be different. But hope is a stubborn weed. It keeps growing in frozen soil until one day you realize it's not hope anymore, it's denial. "I need some fresh air," I said finally. My voice sounded calm, steady, almost detached. No one looked up. Not Mom, refilling Juliet's glass. Not Dad, pouring his 3rd bourbon. Only Aunt Margaret crossed the room and touched my shoulder. Her fingers pressed into my coat sleeve, a tiny Morse code of solidarity. "You're not wrong," she whispered. "You deserve so much more." I nodded once, throat tight. Then I buttoned my coat one button at a time, as if each click were a seal on a decision I hadn't known I was about to make. No one noticed when I walked out the door. Not a single head turned. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. The cold slapped my cheeks as I stepped into the night. Snow crunched under my boots. My car sat at the curb, dusted white, waiting like a quiet ally. I slid behind the wheel card still in my pocket and started the engine. 12 minutes later, I was parked at Council Crest Park, overlooking Portland. The city stretched below like spilled stars, pulsing with Christmas Eve life, families gathered around fireplaces, laughter spilling from windows, clinking glasses. And me, alone in the dark, clutching a $2 card that felt heavier than a stone. I pulled it out, turned it over in my hands. It wasn't just paper. It was 30 years of hierarchy spelled out in inkless print: Juliet the star, me, the afterthought. Tears burned tracks down my face, hot against the December air. For the first time, I allowed the thought I'd been dodging for decades. They will never see me. Not really. And here's where I want to pause and ask you, the one listening right now. Have you ever felt invisible to the very people who were supposed to see you most clearly? Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Whether it's Texas Perth, Manchester Lagos, or a small town no one's heard of. You'd be amazed at how many of us are carrying our own $2 card, that final straw that makes us realize enough is enough. That night, sitting in my car overlooking Portland, I realized this wasn't just about a Christmas present. It was about a lifetime of being measured, minimized, dismissed. The Gucci bag was just the loudest symbol yet. The silence in that living room was more deafening than Juliet's squeals. The card in my pocket wasn't a gift, it was a verdict. And I knew for the first time I couldn't keep playing my part in this performance. Something had to change. The city lights blurred through my tears as I sat in the parked car, but eventually the cold forced me back to my apartment. Portland's night air followed me inside, crisp and sharp, like truth cutting through years of excuses. I dropped my coat on the couch and carried the $2 card straight to my desk. I could have tossed it into the trash. God knows that's what it deserved. But instead, I slipped it between the pages of my leather journal. I didn't understand why at the time, only that it felt like evidence exhibit A in a trial no one else was willing to hold. Saturday morning arrived gray and wet, typical for January. I pulled out my old photo album, stacks of school certificates, and a ledger book I'd used since college. One by one, I spread them across the living room floor until it looked like the dig site of an archaeologist. Only I wasn't unearthing dinosaur bones. I was unearthing my own erasure. I started with birthdays. On the left, a photo of me at 13 blowing out candles on a grocery store cake that tilted awkwardly to one side. The frosting had already melted under the kitchen light, making the blue lettering slide down the sides. In the picture, my smile looked more like an apology than a celebration. Beside it, I laid out Juliet's Sweet 16. The Benson Hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers and white linens. A 3-tier custom cake sat under spotlights. Dad stood proudly beside Juliet, with his arm draped around her shoulder, while Mom clasped a string of pearls around her neck. The difference between the two photos wasn't just years. It was a hierarchy carved in icing and crystal. Next came the college years. I had kept every acceptance letter carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Mine from Portland State had a note clipped to the corner in my father's handwriting. "You'll need to work part-time to cover expenses." Right beside it sat Juliet's acceptance to fashion school. Their note there read, "We're so proud. Don't worry about anything but your studies." My scholarship had covered tuition, yes, but not books rent or the endless fees they never tell you about. So I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore for $12 an hour. Even with that, I finished college carrying $24 those $800 in loans. Juliet, meanwhile, had her tuition covered $38,000 a year, plus a $20,000 study abroad experience in Milan. I'd cut coupons for groceries while she posted cappuccino selfies from Italy, captioned, "Family support is everything." I turned to the graduation photos. Mine cap, crooked gown, wrinkled mom and dad, arriving 20 minutes late. In the corner of the frame, Dad glanced at his watch. The caption in my own handwriting underneath, "Sorry we're late, honey. Juliet's fashion show needed our attention." Juliet's runway lights, rows of applauding guests, my parents in the front row beaming like royalty. It was all there. Documented. Evidence lined up like artifacts of a civilization that had worshipped one child and tolerated the other. The ledger book came last. Its pages told a story numbers never lie about. Columns of my paychecks, rent statements, student loan balances, printouts of emails from Dad. "Sorry, we can't help with your apartment security deposit right now." Beside them, receipts from Juliet's downtown apartment, $2,800 a month, proudly funded by family support. I stared at the figures until they blurred into neon accusations. $57,000 my annual salary. $24,800 student loans still lingering. $1,200 monthly rent for a drafty one-bedroom with unreliable heating. And Juliet luxury loft, brand new furniture, not a bill with her own name on it. For a long time, I just sat on the floor surrounded by my own history. The silence of the room broken only by the hum of the fridge. The card lay on the journal beside me, its mountain scene mocking me with printed cheer. "This isn't imagined," I whispered out loud. "This isn't overreaction." Because that's what I'd been told over and over every time I dared to bring up the imbalance. "Stop being dramatic. You're lucky you even got that. Don't compare yourself to Juliet." But here it was in black and white, in ink and photographs, in debt statements and Instagram captions. The imbalance wasn't in my head. It was systematic, consistent, decades long. I pulled my journal closer and wrote beneath the taped card, "The last time I'll beg for love." Then I silenced the buzzing phone on the table. Group chat notifications, family jokes, casual dinner invitations, I muted them all. My apartment filled with the soft, steady quiet of boundaries forming for the first time. And that's when a new question rose inside me, sharper than pain, clearer than grief. When did hope stop being strength and start being self-destruction? The answer didn't come right away. But as I looked at the spread of evidence around me, I knew the first step I had to stop waiting for them to change and start deciding how I would. The next evening, I carried the sealed box from the living room floor to my kitchen table. I told myself I only wanted to organize things, but deep down, I knew the truth. I needed to see the imbalance in black and white. I needed proof that I hadn't imagined a lifetime of being treated as less. I opened my old leather-bound ledger book. The pages were worn, filled with years of tidy handwriting, paychecks, rent receipts, loan balances. On one side were the numbers from my campus bookstore job, 20 hours a week for $12 an hour. On the other were columns of debt interest charges that stacked year after year until they totaled $24,800. Beside the ledger, I laid down a printout of an email from my father. The subject line was simple: deposit. The body read, "Sorry we can't help with your apartment security deposit right now. Things are tight. $800. That's all it would have taken to give me a start." They hadn't been able to manage it. Next to that, I placed a newspaper clipping I'd saved one mom had mailed to me at the time with proud underlines. The headline, "Local Student Shines at Fashion School." The article was about Juliet. Tuition $38,000 per year, plus $20,000 for her Milan semester. In the margin, Mom had scrawled, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." I looked from the email to the clipping, from the $800 they couldn't spare to the tens of thousands they had written off for my sister without hesitation. The contrast made me laugh, bitter, humorless. I reached for my phone and scrolled Juliet's Instagram feed. There she was, posing in her downtown loft, all glass windows and stainless steel appliances. Caption, "Blessed family support. Couldn't have done it without them. Rent $2,800 a month." Meanwhile, my one-bedroom walk-up cost $1,200, its radiator rattling at night like an old man's cough. No family blessing had paid for it. Every check had come from my own account. I laid the phone on the table beside the ledger and clipping, as if lining up exhibits for a trial. Row by row, the evidence stacked itself. My college acceptance letter with Dad's note. Work part-time for expenses. Juliet's acceptance with Mom's note. Don't worry about anything but your studies. My graduation photo, parents arriving 20 minutes late. Juliet's runway show, parents in the front row glowing. My email asking for help, answered with tight finances. Juliet's Instagram loft, fully funded. The table looked less like a kitchen and more like a courtroom. The verdict was written in every scrap of paper and every digital post. Juliet had always been the chosen one. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Mom, "Dinner Sunday. Your father's grilling steaks." I stared at it for a long moment. The old version of me would have answered immediately, offered to bring dessert, rearranged plans. But I thought of the ledger of the emails of the 29 years lined up in front of me. I typed back, "Sorry, I have plans. No excuse, no apology. Just a fact." A second later, her reply came, "She'll be upset." I set the phone down, the words rolling off me like water. For once, it wasn't my job to prevent their disappointment. I looked back at the evidence covering the table. For years, they'd told me I was too sensitive, that I exaggerated, that Juliet simply needed more. But here it was, preserved in ink, photos, receipts, and posts. Not feelings, not imagination. Proof. I picked up the $2 card from the journal and laid it gently on top of the pile. A cover page, a symbol, the smallest gift they had ever given me, yet somehow the heaviest. "This is the truth," I whispered. My voice didn't shake. For the first time, the words steadied me. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them back into the box. Not to dwell on them, but to keep the record intact. To remind myself that the imbalance wasn't something I invented, it was something they created. From this moment on, I decided the ledger of my life would stop being about what I owed them and start being about the worth I owed myself. The box of evidence stayed tucked beneath my bed, but its presence changed everything. I no longer questioned whether I was imagining things. The proof was there, heavy and undeniable. The only question left was what to do with it. For 29 years, I had invested in the wrong stock. My time, my energy, my money, all funneled toward a family that never paid dividends. Birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. I kept trying, and the return was always the same. Silence, dismissal, a $2 card. So on a gray January morning, I decided to try something radical. I would invest in myself. The first step was a phone call. My hands shook as I dialed the number written on a flyer I'd seen at the community center: Dr. Dottie Williams, licensed therapist, $90 per session. In the past, I would have flinched at the cost, told myself it was too indulgent, that the money was better spent on Juliet's gifts or family dinners. But now I realized $90 was less than I'd once spent on a scarf for Mom that she barely acknowledged. When Dr. Williams's calm voice answered, I booked a session for the following week. Hanging up, I felt both terrified and relieved. The office was modest, tucked above a bookstore downtown. Shelves of well-worn novels lined the waiting room. Dr. Williams greeted me with a warm handshake, silver streaks in her hair, and a steady gaze that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. "Your worth isn't measured by their recognition," she told me after I haltingly explained the Gucci bag, the card, the years of imbalance. "It's measured by how you value yourself." The words landed like a stone in a still pond, rippling outward. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what life might feel like if I stopped chasing approval that would never come. The second step came almost by accident. On my walk home from that first session, I passed a small pottery studio with wide windows. Inside, people sat at spinning wheels, their hands shaping clay into bowls and vases. Something about it stopped me cold, the calm rhythm, the transformation of raw earth into something lasting. A sign on the door read, "6-week beginner's course, $250. $250. Less than what I'd once spent on Juliet's art book. Less than the engraved pen I'd bought Dad. This time the money would buy me something tangible, a skill, a community, maybe even joy." I signed up that evening. Saturday mornings quickly became my sanctuary. At first, the clay resisted me collapsing under my clumsy hands. But week by week, I learned to press more gently, to let the wheel guide me instead of fighting it. Most beginners battle the clay, Miranda, the instructor, told me one morning. "You're learning to collaborate with it." Her words echoed Dr. Williams' "Stop fighting, start building." One day I shaped a bowl that actually held its form, smooth walls rising under my fingers. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that kind of pride. Not pride born from someone else's approval, but from my own effort. At home, the changes spread quietly. I removed the family portraits from my living room wall, the ones that had always felt like monuments to a story I wasn't part of. In their place, I hung 3 prints from a local artist, solitary trees, standing against stormy skies. They felt like mirrors, alone, yes, but resilient. On my bookshelf, I replaced volumes Dad had insisted were cultured reading with novels and poetry I had chosen for myself. Every corner of my apartment began to shift from a holding space into a home. The money I once funneled into elaborate gifts now went toward therapy sessions, pottery supplies, books, and small plants for my windowsill. And with every dollar redirected, something inside me loosened. It wasn't about punishing my family. It was about rebalancing the scales, about finally spending on the one person they had never invested in me. By the end of February, I had a growing collection of imperfect bowls and mugs on my kitchen counter. Most leaned slightly to one side, but to me they looked like trophies. proof that when I poured time and money into myself, something beautiful emerged. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible, not because someone else noticed me, but because I finally noticed myself. March crept in with the usual Portland drizzle, but something in me had changed. Therapy and pottery had planted seeds of quiet confidence, and now those seeds were starting to sprout in the one place I had always worked hardest: school. One Monday morning, Principal Harrington called me into his office. My stomach tightened, old reflex, the kind that expected criticism before praise. His office was as stern as his personality: oak desk, tidy stacks of paper blinds drawn against the gray light. He gestured for me to sit, sliding a folder across the desk. "This is your evaluation," he said. His voice, usually clipped, carried an unfamiliar warmth. "Exceptional work, Elise, truly." I opened the folder cautiously. My eyes fell on a page of student feedback. One line leapt out immediately. Ms. Turner's assignment about writing our life story from another perspective changed how I see myself. I never thought about being the hero instead of the victim. My throat tightened. I blinked fast, not wanting Harrington to see the tears that threatened. All those years of feeling invisible, and here it was proof that my work had helped someone else feel seen. "I've never seen engagement numbers like these," Harrington continued. "We'd like you to lead the summer creative writing program. It comes with a stipend, of course." For a second, I thought I had misheard. A stipend. Not overtime that was never offered to teachers, but a recognition of value: extra pay for leading a program built on my strengths. "I'd be honored," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That afternoon, I sat at my desk long after the last bell rang, staring at the folder of feedback. Words from students leapt off the page like lifelines. "She makes me believe my story matters. She listens. She teaches us to see ourselves differently." They were teenagers, not family. They had no obligation to flatter me, and yet their words carried more truth than 30 years of hollow praise at home. When I got home, I opened my banking app. My account balance wasn't large, but for the first time I saw possibility instead of scarcity. With the stipend from the summer program, I could finally start a savings line labeled not emergency fund, but future dreams. I transferred $500 into it, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed the numbers. A down payment fund for a home that would be truly mine. Not an apartment subsidized by reluctant parents, not a loft flaunted on Instagram. A place I would build brick by brick on my own terms. The validation spread beyond finances. 2 days later, an email appeared in my inbox, an invitation to present at a regional education conference. My first instinct was disbelief. This must be a mistake, I thought, hovering over the delete button. But Dr. Williams's voice came back to me as clearly as if she were in the room. "Assume you deserve good things until proven otherwise." So I clicked accept, clicked. By mid-March, my classroom buzzed with a new energy. I found myself trying bolder lesson plans, asking my students to dig deeper, to take risks in their writing. And they responded with honesty I hadn't expected: essays about absent fathers, about friendships lost, about dreams too fragile to say out loud. One afternoon, as I collected their journals, a student named Marissa lingered. "Ms. Turner," she said, voice hesitant, "that exercise about boundaries, it helped me tell my mom I need more space." She actually listened. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All I managed was a nod, and the realization that while my own mother had rarely listened here, I was helping someone else's. At night, I still sometimes pulled the $2 card from its place in my journal, the snow-capped mountains staring back at me. But now it didn't just represent pain. It represented the starting line. The point where I stopped investing in people who refused to see me and started investing in myself and in the students who looked at me with the kind of respect I'd never received at home. By the time spring break arrived, I noticed subtle shifts even in my posture. My shoulders, once curled inward, had straightened. My voice, once cautious, carried firmer in staff meetings. When the athletic director brushed aside one of my suggestions about integrating writing into physical education, my colleague Sandra immediately spoke up. "Actually, Elise has been saying this for years. The research supports her." I sat in quiet amazement, realizing something monumental. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. For the first time in my life, Recognition wasn't a desperate wish hanging over the Christmas tree, waiting for someone else to hand me a gift. Recognition was growing inside me, watered by my work, my students, and my own belief that I finally mattered. It was close to midnight when the phone rang, slicing through the quiet of my apartment. I jolted awake, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark. Juliet's name blinked across it. For years, I would have answered on the first ring, heart pounding, already preparing to drive across town no matter the hour. This time I hesitated. I swiped to answer. Juliet. Her voice came in ragged sobs. He left me Elise. Derek just walked out after dinner. I can't believe it. I need you here. I can't be alone right now. I sat on the edge of the bed, pressing my palm to my forehead. My sister's world had always been dramatic storms and lightning strikes. Breakups, fights with friends, job woes, every crisis had been a reason to summon me, and I had always come running. No matter if I was grading papers, sick with the flu, or broke from buying her groceries, I came. The old reflex tugged at me now. My shoes were by the door. My keys lay on the counter. All it would take was 5 minutes, and I'd be driving headlights, cutting through the wet Portland streets. But something in me held still. I'm so sorry, Juliet, I said softly. That must hurt terribly. Please, Elise. I can't do this alone. I need you now. Her voice broke into another sob. I took a long breath, steadying myself. I can talk with you tomorrow during my lunch break. There was silence on the line. Stunned silence. What, Elise? Are you serious? I'm crying here. I can't sleep. I can't breathe. You've always come before. I know, I said gently. But my time matters too. I need rest. I'll be here for you tomorrow, I promise. The silence stretched heavy with disbelief. I could almost hear her scrambling to adjust to a reality where I wasn't her emergency exit anymore. Finally, her voice came smaller, almost childlike. I guess I could wait until tomorrow. A pause. Then something I'd never heard from her before. I'm sorry, Elise. I didn't think about what time it was for you. For years, I had begged for crumbs of acknowledgement. And here, at nearly 1 a.m, a crack appeared in Juliet's armor. A simple apology. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. We'll talk then. We hung up. I lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't from panic. It was from victory, quiet, fragile, but real. I expected Mom's call next, the outrage, the accusations. How could you abandon your sister in her time of need after everything we've done for you? It came the following afternoon, her voice sharp, even through voicemail. But instead of listening to the end, I pressed delete. My thumb didn't even tremble. Over the next weeks, I noticed how my world was expanding. My pottery classmates invited me to join a Saturday hiking trip to Mount Hood. I said yes, surprising myself. At school, Robert, the history teacher, whose classroom was across from mine, lingered by my desk one afternoon. He fidgeted with a paperclip, eyes darting nervously. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner Friday, he said. Nothing formal, just as friends. But I've always admired the way your students light up in your class. His voice was awkward, sincere. And for once, I didn't automatically measure myself against Juliet, how she would have rolled her eyes, how my parents would have dismissed it. I simply smiled and said I'd like that. Aunt Margaret visited not long after carrying a folded quilt that had belonged to our grandmother. She spread it across my bed, her hands smoothing the faded fabric. She always saw your light, Elise, Margaret said softly. That's why she left this for you. She knew you'd appreciate its story. I touched the stitches, uneven but strong, and thought of the pottery bowls lining my counter, imperfect but mine. That night, as I turned off the lamp and slid under the quilt, I realized something. Setting boundaries didn't mean I loved my sister less. It meant I finally loved myself enough to stop breaking every time she called. For the first time, I fell asleep, without guilt pressing against my chest. June arrived with rare Portland sunshine, and with it came Cousin Caleb's wedding. The invitation had been in the family group chat for months, but I'd made my decision early. I would attend, and I would drive separately. No more piling into Mom and Dad's car like an afterthought. No more slipping in unnoticed. This time I would walk in on my own terms. Robert offered to drive. When he pulled up to my building in his reliable sedan, I stepped out in a sage green silk dress that had taken me 3 months of careful budgeting to buy. It wasn't flashy, but it fit me perfectly affordable elegance that didn't need anyone's approval. Robert's eyes lit up. "You look beautiful," he said softly, resting a hand at the small of my back. For a moment, I let myself believe him. The country club sprawled across manicured lawns at the base of Mount Hood, its gardens heavy with roses. Relatives buzzed at the entrance, hugging, laughing, already trading gossip. I felt Robert's steady presence beside me as Juliet's sequined cocktail dress caught the sunlight. Always one notch above appropriate, she hurried forward, her smile wide. "Elise, you actually came, and you brought a friend, Robert Thompson," he said, extending a hand. "Colleague, and more," I added firmly. "We've been dating for 3 months." Juliet's brows arched. "Mom didn't mention that." I smiled. "Mom doesn't know everything about my life anymore." As if summoned, Mom appeared, her hug tight and perfumed. "Elise, darling." Her eyes flicked over my necklace, my dress. Robert's arm around me. "Your apartment must be getting cramped with company these days. Have you thought about upgrading?" The old sting rose in my chest, but I steadied my breath. "My apartment suits me perfectly," I said, voice calm. Dad joined us, tugging at his collar. "There's my independent girl," he announced, "always managing on her own." The words once meant dismissal. Now they sounded more like reluctant acknowledgement. Aunt Margaret swept in like a rescue, pulling me into a genuine embrace. "Look at you," she whispered, eyes warm, "standing tall." She leaned close, her voice lowering. "Your parents are having financial troubles. Investments tanked." The revelation hit me like a key turning in a lock. Suddenly, the cracks were visible everywhere. During the reception, I caught Dad arguing in harsh whispers with the photographer about payment terms, his voice taut with strain. Mom clutched a handbag that wasn't her usual Prada, but a scuffed leather clutch I'd never seen before. Juliet at the bar handed over her credit card, only for the bartender to shake his head. Her face drained, panic flickering as she fumbled for another. The Turner family's gloss was thinning, and for the first time I saw it clearly. I slipped out into the garden for air, breathing in roses, heavy with June bloom. The sun dipped, casting amber light across trellises. A voice broke the quiet. "Running away again, Juliet." Her mascara smudged her heels, sinking slightly into the grass. Taking a moment, I corrected, meeting her eyes. She exhaled, sinking onto a stone bench. "You're different now." I sat beside her, careful to leave space. I realized how unfair everything was. Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to live on what I actually earn. I never had to." Tears streaked through her foundation. For once, she wasn't the princess. She was just my sister, raw and unpolished. "That sounds difficult," I said gently. She shook her head. "You stood on your own. I never learned how." For a rare moment, silence stretched between us, not hostile, but almost peaceful. Back inside, relatives circled me with congratulations. "Heard you got department head, Elise," Uncle George boomed. Mom hovered, fingers twisting her wedding band. "Elise was always our practical one," she told anyone who would listen. Dad clapped my shoulder, his smile brittle. For once, I was no longer invisible. They all saw me, but not out of love, out of necessity. Later, as Robert found me by the cake table, his smile was full of quiet relief. "You handled that beautifully," he murmured. I let my eyes wander across the reception hall, where roses spilled across white tablecloths, and the family I'd once begged to notice me now turned one by one in my direction. The irony was sharp, almost bitter. After all these years, they saw me. And yet the only validation I truly trusted was the steady hand in mine, as Robert guided me back into the night. The garden behind the reception hall glowed in the fading light, roses climbing trellises heavy with June perfume. I stood there breathing deeply, letting Dr. Williams' advice echo in my mind. Count backward from 10. Breathe. Process surprise before reaction. The murmur of laughter and clinking glasses drifted from the ballroom, muffled by the hedge. For the first time all evening, I felt steady again. A voice broke the quiet. Running away again, I turned. Juliet stood a few steps behind me, sequined dress catching the last of the sun. Up close, I saw the smudges of mascara at the corners of her eyes. The sparkle she usually carried had dulled. She stepped forward and sank onto a stone bench, the heels of her shoes sinking into soft grass. "You're different now," she said after a long silence. "It's unnerving." I sat beside her, leaving a careful gap between us. "I had to be," I replied. I realized how unfair everything was. Her laugh came brittle. "Unfair. That word doesn't even cover it." She pulled at a thread on her clutch, then let her hand fall. "They can't support me anymore. Dad's business is collapsing, the condo's going on the market, my cards are maxed out." For years I had pictured this moment, Juliet admitting the imbalance, but the reality felt stranger, softer. She wasn't gloating now. She was unraveling. "I never learned to stand on my own," she whispered. A tear slipped free, leaving a track through her foundation. "I don't know how to live on what I actually earn." Her words hung in the amber light. I could have reached for her hand. I could have said, "Don't worry, I'll help." That was the old Elise, the fixer, the rescuer, the invisible one who existed to patch over everyone else's messes. Instead, I breathed and said quietly, "That sounds difficult." She turned toward me, startled. "That's all you're going to say. I'm not dismissing it, Juliet. I hear you. I just can't fix it for you." Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked rapidly as if trying to adjust to a new script she hadn't rehearsed. "But you always, not anymore." My voice was firm but calm. I spent years carrying burdens that weren't mine. I won't go back to that. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of cicadas and the rustle of roses in the evening air. Then Juliet exhaled, shoulders slumping. "I don't even know where to start." "You start small," I said. "A budget, roommates, cooking at home instead of going out. That's how I made it my first years teaching. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real." Her eyes searched mine, as though weighing whether this was judgment or mercy. Finally, she nodded once. "I guess I'll have to learn." We sat there side by side, not as rivals, not as the adored daughter and the overlooked one, but simply as two women both bruised in different ways, both facing the consequences of choices they hadn't entirely made. The silence between us felt different this time. Not hostile, not cold, just possible. Inside, applause swelled as someone made a toast. Juliet brushed at her cheek, ruining what remained of her makeup. "You're stronger than me, Elise," she said softly. "I hate admitting it, but you are." I shook my head. "Strength isn't permanent. It's just practice. You'll get there." The garden lights flickered on, washing the roses in pale gold. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel the urge to shrink beside my sister. I didn't feel invisible. And maybe, just maybe, Juliet was beginning to see me too, not as competition, not as a safety net, but as a person in my own right. When we finally rose to go back inside, she walked half a step behind me, not out of deference, but because she was unsteady in her heels. For the first time, I didn't rush to hold her arm. She would have to find her balance herself. A week after the wedding, I parked my Honda in front of my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock. My watch was already set to count down 2 hours, the maximum I had promised myself to stay. This wasn't going to be another endless night of subtle digs and guilt trips. 2 hours, then I was gone. The porch light flickered weakly as Mom opened the door, hugging me too tightly. "Elise, you look wonderful. That promotion agrees with you." I stepped inside and immediately noticed the differences. The Italian leather sectional was gone, replaced by a generic beige sofa. The crystal vase that once dominated the coffee table had vanished. Dad rose from his chair, his shoulders stooped. "Punctual as always," he said. Juliet sat in the corner, unusually quiet, her manicured fingers twisting in her lap. A tray of lemon cookies waited on the coffee table, the kind Mom used to make when she wanted everyone in a good mood. I settled into a chair back straight. "I can stay until 8, I said clearly. Dad cleared his throat, pacing in front of the fireplace where no fire burned. The market downturn has been brutal. My firm's portfolio? Well, we've had significant losses. Mom clasped her hands, voice dropping. We might lose the house if things don't improve. I listened silently, waiting. Juliet's voice was small. My lease is up next month. The landlord's raising the rent again. I don't know what I'm going to do. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away as if rehearsed. Mom leaned forward, taking my hand. We noticed your district announced that new department head position, the one with the raise. You've always been so independent, Elise. So capable. We were wondering if you might temporarily help your sister. Just until things stabilize. The words temporarily help rang in my ears. I had heard them before, dressed in different costumes. Can you cover this month's utilities? Could you lend Juliet some money for textbooks? Could you bring groceries just this once? Always temporary, always a promise that the imbalance would be corrected soon. It never was. I set my cup carefully on the table. What exactly are you asking? Dad's jaw tightened. Juliet's downtown apartment is expensive, but she can't just give it up. It would look unfortunate. We thought you might cover part of her rent until my firm recovers. There it was, plain as the $2 card tucked in my journal. I let the silence stretch my heartbeat steady. Finally, I said no. Mom's face paled. Elise, please. Family helps family. I met her gaze. I'm not in a position to fund Juliet's lifestyle. I've struggled to pay my own rent for years, and you never stepped in. I won't sacrifice my security now that you've decided to notice me. Dad's voice sharpened. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, the familiar script. The guilt. But I felt no shame this time. What you've done, I said evenly, is make sure Juliet always had more. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. And what you gave me was less, not just in money, but in attention. This isn't repayment. This is clarity. Juliet's eyes shimmered with tears. She's right, she whispered. You've always treated her as less important. I've benefited from it. I know that. The room went still. Dad's mouth opened, then shut again. Mom's shoulders shook. For the first time in decades, the family mythology cracked. I rose, smoothing my skirt. I need acknowledgement of what's happened. I need my boundaries respected. I'm willing to help Juliet find an affordable apartment, draft a budget, apply for jobs. But I will not be the solution to problems created by favoritism and denial. The timer on my watch buzzed softly. 2 hours. I picked up my purse. I'll let myself out, I said. The night air outside felt sharp, almost cleansing. Stars winked above me as I slid behind the wheel. For years I had left this house carrying the weight of guilt. Tonight, I carried only truth. The living room felt colder than the night outside. I sat back down, my purse still at my feet, and for once I didn't let their words scatter me. Dad paced near the window. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Juliet hunched in the corner like a schoolgirl waiting for detention. I reached into my bag and pulled out the worn Christmas card. The snow-capped mountains on the front had faded at the corners where I'd handled it so many times. Without a word, I set it in the center of the coffee table. Dad frowned. A Christmas card. Really, Elise? We're discussing serious financial matters. I kept my voice calm. This isn't about money. This card represents 29 years of messages that I mattered less. Mom's lips parted, protest trembling on her tongue. But I didn't let her speak. I opened the folder I'd brought, the one with photographs, letters, and copies of emails, and began laying them out one by one. Here's my 13th birthday. Grocery store cake frosting melting under the kitchen lights. I placed the photo beside the card. And here's Juliet's sweet 16. Benson Hotel ballroom pearls a 3-tier cake under chandeliers. Mom's hand trembled on her lap. I set down my college acceptance letter with Dad's scrawl, work part-time for expenses. Then Juliet's with Mom's handwriting, don't worry about anything but your studies. Another photo, my graduation, parents arriving late, Dad checking his watch. Then Juliet's runway show with both of them front row glowing like royalty. Finally, the email, sorry we can't help with your deposit right now. Next to a newspaper clipping, Juliet's $20,000 Milan program. The table looked like a courtroom exhibit, each piece a silent witness. "This isn't one incident," I said, my voice low but steady. "This is a pattern. Every milestone, every holiday, every opportunity." The message was always the same: Juliet deserves more. "That's ridiculous," Dad snapped, color rising in his face. "We gave you everything you needed." "But never what I wanted," Juliet said suddenly. The room froze. She leaned forward, eyes glassy but clear. "She's right. We always treated her as less. I saw it. I benefited from it. And I never said anything." Mom's tissue dropped to the floor. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it, words failing him for once. "I'm not saying you meant to be cruel," I continued. "But intent doesn't erase impact. I grew up invisible in my own home, and I will not carry that role into adulthood." Mom's voice cracked. "So you won't help your sister. I will not subsidize a luxury apartment while I've scraped by on my own," I said. "I'll help her find something affordable. I'll share what I've learned about budgeting, about surviving. But I will not sacrifice my financial security or my self-respect to maintain a pattern that destroyed me." Dad's hands curled into fists at his sides. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." I met his eyes. "No. This is how I repay myself, with honesty." Silence settled, heavy, broken only by Juliet's quiet sobs. For once, they weren't for attention. They were for recognition. I stood gathering my folder, sliding the card back inside. "If we want a relationship moving forward, it begins with respect and equality, nothing less." Mom's shoulders shook, her face pale. Dad turned toward the window, his jaw locked. Juliet whispered, "She doesn't owe us. None of this is her responsibility." For the first time in decades, the truth sat between us, unwelcome, undeniable, but alive. I picked up my purse and straightened my shoulders. "Think about what I've said. I won't repeat myself again." The door closed behind me with a soft click. Outside, the air was sharp, cleansing. The stars above felt like witnesses to a verdict finally spoken. 12 months had passed since the night I laid my evidence across my parents' coffee table. A year since I walked out with the $2 Christmas card tucked in my purse, knowing the rules of our family had finally changed. Now I stood at the threshold of my new condo, the key clicking into place with a satisfying weight. The bamboo floor gleamed beneath the afternoon sun, the walls freshly painted in warm ivory. The air smelled faintly of new wood and lavender from the candle Aunt Margaret had brought. My home. Not borrowed, not subsidized, not a hand-me-down. Mine. The framed house key hung by the entryway, mounted on a plaque that read, $18,000, the price of freedom. Every dollar had come from overtime tutoring stipends from summer programs and careful saving. It wasn't just money. It was proof that boundaries had given me space to build something of my own. Robert carried in the last box, labeled books, setting it on the dining table. "That's the last of them," he said, brushing dust from his hands. He smiled the way he always did, when he was proud, but didn't want to say it outright. "This place suits you." I smiled back, the words sinking into me like sunlight. For years I'd heard independent as a dismissal, an excuse for why my parents gave me less. Now it sounded like respect. That evening I set the table for 4. Not a grand banquet, just simple elegance, white plates, linen napkins, wildflowers arranged in a ceramic vase I had shaped in pottery class. The guest list was small and deliberate: Robert, Aunt Margaret, and Juliet. No more crowded gatherings where I disappeared in the background. This dinner was on my terms. The doorbell rang, and Juliet appeared, holding a modest houseplant and a bottle of mid-priced wine. She wore a neat blazer, her hair pulled back, her makeup understated. Gone were the designer bags and extravagant heels. "Congratulations, Elise," she said, stepping inside. Her smile was tentative but real. "Your place is beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, and I meant it. As she helped me arrange the dishes, Juliet admitted she had moved in with a roommate she found through work. "It's not fancy," she said, "but I can pay for it myself. And I'm learning more about budgeting than I ever thought I would." Her voice carried humility I had never heard before. For once, she wasn't the princess. She was simply a woman, finding her own footing. Dinner was lively in a way that felt different from past family gatherings. Aunt Margaret shared stories about our grandmother, her laughter filling the room. Robert asked Juliet about her new job, and she spoke without the usual bravado, instead, with quiet pride about finishing her first major project on her own. As I passed the salad bowl I'd made with my own hands, I realized the table was more than furniture. It was a symbol of the family I was choosing to build, not out of obligation, but out of honesty. Later, as I cleared plates, my phone buzzed with a message from Dad. Hope the move went well. 5 words. Not much, but more careful, less commanding than before. Mom had started calling weekly too, her conversations cautious but increasingly genuine. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Juliet lingered after dinner, helping me wipe counters. She paused, looking around my condo. It feels different here, she said. Peaceful. It's because it's mine, I answered simply. She nodded, her eyes shining. I'm glad you stood up for yourself, Elise. It made me realize I have to do the same. When the last guest had gone and the apartment grew quiet, I stood by the balcony watching the Portland skyline glow against the night. A year ago, I'd sat in my car sobbing over a worthless card. Tonight I stood in a home built by my own choices, surrounded by people who respected the woman I had become. I touched the framed card on my desk before turning off the lights. What once symbolized invisibility now represented strength. It was proof that even the smallest insult could become the spark for transformation, if you let it. 1 year after I placed the $2 Christmas card on my parents' coffee table, my life looked completely different. I walked across the bamboo floor of my new condo, sunlight spilling in through wide windows I had chosen myself, the scent of lavender candles filling the air. The walls weren't lined with portraits chosen to impress neighbors, and the furniture wasn't bought with someone else's money. Every item, every detail was something I had selected, saved for, and earned. For the first time, the space I lived in felt like an extension of my own soul. Near the door hung a framed house key. Beneath it was a small plaque I had made at the pottery studio, $18,000, the price of freedom. That number represented overtime hours, tutoring, after-school summer programs I had led, and nights when I chose to save instead of spend. To anyone else, it was just a plaque. To me, it was a reminder that my worth could never again be measured in how little or how much my family gave me. Robert set down the last moving box labeled books. That's it, he said, brushing the dust from his hands, his smile soft but steady. This place suits you. For years, the word independent had been used against me, a reason my parents dismissed me, a way to excuse why they gave Juliet more. But in his mouth, the word sounded like respect. For the first time, it warmed me instead of stinging. That evening, I set the table for 4. Not a glamorous feast, just a simple dinner I had planned with intention, a vase of wildflowers I'd bought at the farmer's market, plates I'd chosen in soft cream, a serving bowl I had shaped myself on the pottery wheel. The guest list was small: Robert, Aunt Margaret, and Juliet. No more crowded gatherings where my voice vanished. No more pretending. This dinner was mine on my terms. The doorbell rang and Juliet appeared holding a modest houseplant and a bottle of mid-priced wine. She wasn't draped in sequins or carrying a designer purse this time. Her clothes were professional but simple, her makeup understated. "Congratulations, Elise," she said, stepping inside. Her smile was tentative but real. "Your place is beautiful." As we prepared dinner together, she admitted she had moved in with a roommate she found through work. "It's not fancy," she said, "but I can pay for it myself. I'm learning more about budgeting than I ever thought I would." There was no arrogance in her voice, only humility. For once, she wasn't the princess expecting applause. She was a woman learning how to stand. Dinner was lively in a way I had never experienced in my parents' home. Aunt Margaret told stories about our grandmother, her laughter warm and full. Robert asked Juliet about her new job, and she answered honestly, pride soft instead of sharp. We ate, we talked, we existed without the constant shadow of favoritism. And I realized something powerful. I didn't need the entire family to recognize me. I only needed a few people who truly saw me and the courage to see myself. Later that night, when everyone had left, I stood by the balcony with the city lights glittering below. I pulled the framed $2 card from my desk, holding it for a long moment. A year ago, it had been evidence of erasure. Tonight, it was proof of transformation. That card had forced me to confront the truth I had been running from, that waiting for their approval was slowly destroying me. By walking away, I had chosen life. A verse came to me then, one I had written in my journal during those first therapy sessions. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Proverbs 22:3. For years I had kept going, hoping their love would finally balance out, ignoring the danger to my own spirit. The moment I took refuge, set boundaries, said no, I finally found wisdom. Another line echoed in my heart from Psalm 139:14. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My worth had never depended on Gucci bags, engraved pens, or late congratulations. My worth was built in from the very beginning. All I needed was to believe it. I thought, too, of a Western saying I had once read in a novel: we accept the love we think we deserve. For nearly 3 decades, I had accepted scraps, convinced I deserved no better. Now I had learned that the truest revenge was not bitterness, but refusing to settle for less than respect. I had built a new life, not out of their approval, but out of my own belief that I was enough. As I sat down at my desk, pen in hand, I wrote in my journal, "Worth is inherent, not earned or granted by others." Then I closed it, no longer needing to prove the words to myself. They had already taken root. And so I leave you with this: in a world full of family hierarchies, favoritism, and invisible children, sometimes the most powerful revenge is the quietest one, choosing to live free, choosing to invest in yourself, choosing to build a home and a life on your own terms. That is the heartbeat of true revenge stories. Not vengeance through cruelty, but transformation through clarity. Now I want to ask you, have you ever held on to something small, like my $2 card, that suddenly revealed the truth about your place in someone's world? What was your breaking point? Your wake-up call? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might be waiting to read it and find the courage to change their own life. And if this story resonated with you, if you found strength in it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more true revenge stories, and tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're in Texas, Manchester, Lagos, or a small town nobody has heard of, your voice matters here. Together we prove that invisibility can be broken, that self-worth can be reclaimed, and that the greatest revenge is simply living as if you were always enough, because you are. I turned off the porch light, the condo quiet and safe around me, and whispered into the night. The gift wasn't the card. The gift was finally finding myself. Then I closed the door, ready for whatever came next.